Cleopatra, 7th. Cleopatra was the last queen of Egypt from the Ptolemaic dynasty, who lived from BC to BC. You may have heard this name in many places, but the question remains why she became so famous, with the help of which Cleopatra managed to maintain her attractiveness and influence in society. How could a girl become a symbol of female power and a celebrity not only in her era, but also in our time? Let's start by looking at her origins. Cleopatra was Greek and a descendant of one of Alexander the Great's military leaders. The girl was not only incredibly beautiful and charming, but also smart. She studied the Egyptian language and made a lot of efforts to develop Egyptian culture. Cleopatra was a good ruler at that time. However, she also had a personal life. She had relations with two influential Romans of her time, Julius the Great and Mark Antony. But how did such a beautiful ruler who devoted herself entirely to her work manage to preserve her beauty? In order to find out some of the secrets of her beauty, let's first look at her appearance. We cannot know this information for sure because there are many legends about her, but in fact, no one had a clear answer to what she looked like in life. Plutarch, who was a Greek historian and wrote many years after the death of the operator, said that her beauty was in itself incomparable. But the appeal still lay in the voice, the mind, the charm, and the ability to enchant. This meant that appearance was not Cleopatra's main asset. She had incredible intelligence, charisma, and the ability to conduct a conversation in such a way as to be a good ruler for her country. But these were just the words of Plutarch on the coins that were in pre-jealousy. Cleopatra was depicted with a long nose, an elongated face, and a rather strong chin. Cleopatra can also be seen on various Egyptian statues and frescoes in some images. She has a very thin body, large eyes, and a high forehead. All these traits were typical of the goddess Isis, with whom she identified herself. Many might think that Cleopatra was able to become a good ruler only because of her skills. Of course, this was true, but her appearance and ability to maintain her youth also played an important role in her reign. Unfortunately, from those times, there are no step-by-step instructions on how exactly she did it, and there was no scientific evidence about the methods of caring for her beauty. However, thanks to various legends and written from authors who lived a little later, you can learn some pretty interesting secrets from Cleopatra. Today we will talk about these secrets. We will analyze each method separately and in all details. You are now wondering what method you need to use to maintain your youth throughout all these centuries, like Cleopatra. And I will answer you that the first and most effective method was Cleopatra's milk baths. Many people say that she took baths in donkey milk. The girl often added honey and rose petals there for greater effect and relaxation. Historical legends also say that she had up to 700 means to regularly collect milk for her rejuvenation. Cleopatra knew how this bath could be useful and over time even saw the result that amazed her. And it was for this reason that the girl continued to use such baths, because they contained lactic acid, which gently removed dead skin cells. Milk fat, which was the basis of donkey milk, moisturized and softened all the skin on her body, which led to even greater results. You may be surprised by the components of this bath, honey and roses. However, they were also an important aspect for the result. Honey acted in this method more as an antiseptic. It retained moisture and relaxed the muscles, and the roses had quite an effective result. They soothed the skin and gave off quite a pleasant aroma because donkey milk was very strong and Cleopatra did not always like its smell. If you want to look as young as Cleopatra, then there are many different recipes for taking a bath. But since for Cleopatra, the bath was not just skincare, of course this ritual had a clear schedule and involved many people. Often this ritual was performed in the morning or evening, especially before important meetings, intimate dates with their gentlemen, or national holidays. In order for Cleopatra to be sincerely pleased with the result, it was necessary to warm the milk to body temperature so that it would not overheat and not touch the queen's skin. Also, the milk had to be fresh, otherwise the effect would not be the same. Instead of rose petals, they could also add lotus flower essence. However, this was at the request of Cleopatra herself. But you may ask how Cleopatra could host and prepare this entire ceremony on her own. Of course, this was not true. Since Cleopatra was a queen, she did not participate in all the preparations. The girl had priestesses of beauty, the so-called servants. These were not just slaves, but trained women. They had knowledge of herbs, aromas, and various rituals. They were the ones who helped warm up the milk, mixed the oils, controlled the temperature of the water, and even helped Cleopatra wipe her body. In order for Cleopatra's bathroom to have a pleasant atmosphere and smells, aromathesses also participated in these rituals. These were women who worked with incense and always monitored cleanliness. Depending on the case, masseuses also came to Cleopatra while she was in the bathroom. These women carefully massaged her hands, back and neck so that the woman felt real relaxation. Since Cleopatra was a queen, she certainly had bodyguards who stood behind the door and monitored law and order. Let's dive into the atmosphere of the whole process of understanding this bath. Before Cleopatra enters her luxurious bath, the priestesses lit aromatic lamps in advance. Also, the smoke of incense was spread throughout the room, and live music was playing. It could be a harp, a flute, or even the singing of slaves. Of course, as soon as Cleopatra entered her bathroom, she did not immediately plunge into the water. Before that, she had special preparatory rituals. One of these rituals was washing the body with a herbal decoction. It was symbolic because it cleansed from evil spirits of illness and fatigue. After the entire body was absolutely clean and wiped, Cleopatra finally immersed herself in her milk bath. For the ideal effect on the face, the girl could lie there for 15 or 30 minutes, completely immersed inside. After Cleopatra's body had relaxed well and warmed up, the masseuses came into the bathroom and rubbed her body with aromatic oils. And after that, they made light movements around her neck, shoulders, and feet. After this wonderful massage, Cleopatra lay immersed in water for some time. Well, when all the procedures were finished and the girls had to go about their business, her body was covered in incense, light linen clothes were put on so that her body could continue to breathe and not overheat. But when she had to go to various meetings, of course, Cleopatra had various hairstyles done. Various oils and ochre were applied to her face. Such a bath could help Cleopatra to prepare for an important meeting with Caesar or Mark Antony. At such moments, when she was immersed in a warm bath with milk, the woman felt like a real goddess. I think you are already eager to learn about the next method of rejuvenation of Cleopatra and preservation of her beauty. You are lucky. After all, it is to this that we are moving on to the second method, and her preservation of youth were natural masks and oils. Now, having heard this method, you may wonder why Cleopatra did these procedures, because she was already young and beautiful. But I will answer you, these rituals took place in order to restore the skin after the scorching sun, wind, and dust that were in Egypt. Also, in this way, a woman could prepare for an appearance in public or a visit from ambassadors. Since she was the most important queen, Cleopatra had to look flawless. Since a woman had several lovers in her arsenal, she had to look perfect and incredibly beautiful among them. But that was not all, because in Egypt, beauty was the same as power. With such masks and oils, Cleopatra could maintain her youth, health, and sacred power. You are probably very interested in how it all happened. So let's consider where and when Cleopatra applied certain masks and oils. Of course, Cleopatra could not do this in front of everyone because it was a rather intimate process. Therefore, she had a private beauty room. This room could be located inside the palace or a thermal complex for a more effective result. In order for Cleopatra to be comfortable in this room during the procedure, the room was specially decorated with white marble, and the walls were decorated with an image of her favorite goddess Isis, or a lotus. Since Cleopatra could not do all this alone with the baths, she had a so-called female cult of beauty in which there were many people helping her. She had specialists in ointments and herbs, so-called herbalists, as slaves. These women could study the properties of plants, oils, and minerals. They knew the proportions, recipes, and holding time very well, so that the effect of the procedure was the best. Cleopatra could not apply these masks herself. Therefore, she had skincare workers. It was these women who applied the masks, massaged and removed dead skin cells from her face using soft cloth or linen napkins. But do not think that Cleopatra was completely ignorant of all this beauty business. This was not so because Cleopatra herself knew the composition of both oils and herbs. Since she was also a ruler, the woman studied medicine and cosmetics. She knew in detail how this or that product could affect her skin. Depending on her mood or the condition of her skin, Cleopatra could choose the ingredients herself, since no one but her knew better what might be suitable. Since these procedures did not only take place at one time of day, Cleopatra had special aromatists. They selected scents depending on the time of day. For example, if Cleopatra was given a mask or oils were applied in the morning, these were citrus aromas for more energy and strength. In the evening, aromatists used more calm aromas, such as myrrh or sandalwood. Due to the fact that Cleopatra was a public figure, she had to do everything perfectly and beautifully. Therefore, she had a so-called beauty caretaker. This was the supreme courtier. She was the senior assistant and was responsible for the care scene itself. You are probably insanely interested in how exactly the ritual itself took place and what hidden secrets such procedures contained. Before the start of the ritual itself, the entire space was filled with pleasant aromas. It could be the aroma of rose, cedar, incense. In order for Cleopatra not to be sad, or so that she would not be immersed in her thoughts, a harp, bells, or the singing of priestesses played in the background music. In order to relax Cleopatra's skin well, the air was aromatized with steam from hot stones with essential oils. Thus, her pores opened and relaxed, and the masks had a greater effect. Now let's talk about the stages of the procedure itself, because there was a clear sequence to make the ruler feel comfortable. The initial stage, of course, was cleansing the skin so that the masks and oils could penetrate her body well. Thanks to a warm decoction of chamomile or sandalwood, Cleopatra's face and body were wiped so that it was well cleansed of all dirt and sand. Sometimes they could even use a milk honey scrub with fine Nile salt, because it was quite effective in deep cleansing. After Cleopatra's skin was perfectly cleansed and prepared for the procedures, the slaves moved on to applying the masks. In order not to damage Cleopatra's skin, these masks were applied very carefully and only to certain places. The mask was applied to the face, of course, the neck and décolleté area, sometimes at the request of the queen herself. It could be applied to the arms and chest. Let me give you some examples of such masks so that you understand what effect they had on Cleopatra's skin. The first mask and her favorite was a honey mask with aloe. It was this that had the greatest effect on the queen. This mask included honey, aloe juice, and cistus powder. With this mask, Cleopatra nourished her entire skin and also healed various wounds and cuts. It was with this mask and the effect of aloe that she could remove various irritations from her face and body after the scorching sun. Her other favorite mask was cucumber with lotus. It included everything from blue lotus to pink clay. The effect was amazing because this mask cooled and removed swelling from Cleopatra. And this was important for her face and body to look flawless. Another mask that the queen used was clay with milk. Its composition was quite interesting. This mask included white clay milk and myrrh essential oil for a pleasant aroma, because milk had a specific smell. Cleopatra's skin was cleansed and also had a special matte effect, which was very important because in the sun her skin could look cleaner and smoother. And the very last mask that was Cleopatra's favorite was gold. It was also special. Cleopatra used this mask in rather rare cases. It included beeswax, saffron oil, and amber powder. As you may have noticed, it was called the gold mask, and this was not without reason, because it included saffron. And this was the most expensive spice in the world. For this reason, very little oil was added, but it had an amazing effect on the skin. With the help of this mask, Cleopatra rejuvenated herself and had a special glow that in some cases could even be useful for her in negotiations, so that men would pay attention to her. We all know very well that masks take time to work, and Cleopatra was no exception. When a mask was applied to her face and body, it had to remain there for 15 or 20 minutes. Of course, it was difficult for Cleopatra to entertain herself at this time. Therefore, while the mask was on her face and body, they read poetry to her, told stories of the gods, or simply sang songs. Sometimes, of course, in rare cases, Cleopatra could lie with the mask, looking into a bronze mirror, or simply listen to the music of the harp. Quite often, this procedure was accompanied by a light massage of the head, arms, or shoulders for complete immersion and relaxation. After all this rather long time had passed, Cleopatra's mask was removed with warm water. Sometimes it could also be removed with a soft linen cloth that was soaked in a decoction of rose or hibiscus, which also had a positive effect on her skin. After the mask was removed from the body or face, aromatic oils were applied to it, rubbing them in with light circular movements. Even such a small thing had a positive effect on Cleopatra's youth, since her forehead was rubbed with special movements from the center to the temples, which helped her smooth out wrinkles. The neck was rubbed down the lymph in order to relax it, and the cheeks were massaged with upward movements. This helped her to make her cheekbones more expressive, which had a positive effect on her appearance. Of course, Cleopatra did all these procedures not only for the result on her body and skin. She had quite positive physical sensations during the procedure. The warmth and moisture from the compresses were like an enveloping touch. She also found it very pleasant to feel the softness of honey or even wax from the cold cucumber contained in the mask. When all these substances contained in her products flowed down her skin, they brought her unbridled pleasure. Thanks to such a ritual, Cleopatra experienced deep relaxation. It was almost like a trance state. During these procedures, she could immerse herself and tune in before an important meeting or relax after a hard day. Aromas also had a positive effect on Cleopatra because each stage was a new romantic wave. Since one of her masks contained saffron, it had a spicy aroma, but not too sharp. Also, fresh cucumber and thick honey, and of course the sweetness of roses, were incredibly pleasing to Cleopatra, and it was thanks to them that she was always in a good mood. Also, one cannot ignore Cleopatra's mental sensations. Such rituals helped her focus on herself as a living embodiment of the goddess. I think everyone knows that if you have as much good mood as possible, then the condition of your skin and body always improves. For Cleopatra, this was real bliss. She could also clear her mind of worries and tune in to the goal with the help of these masks. With such masks and oils, Cleopatra supported Vera in her power and beauty, and it was thanks to them that she kept her skin in excellent condition. It is impossible to ignore the symbolism of such oils and masks, because it was not just cosmetics, it was the sacrament of rebirth. Cleopatra believed that by removing a mask, she removed her old skin, and by lubricating herself with oil, she rubbed in the power of the sun, the moisture of the Nile, and the fragrance of the gods. Each oil and each clay, as which were ingredients of the magical sewing, were the ones that bestowed not only beauty, but also confidence, power, and also an important factor, charisma, which more than once saved Cleopatra. Now let's move on to the more hidden secrets of these procedures, thanks to which Cleopatra was even better. In ancient times, masks were like a political tool and a psychological weapon against their opponent. Skincare rituals, various masks, oils, and also milk baths emphasized Cleopatra's divinity before the people and before men. It is not surprising that Cleopatra was often compared to a goddess, because skin that smelled of lotus and myrrh was perceived as divine and not as the skin of a mortal woman. Cleopatra had light, smooth skin. Thanks to all these rituals, it helped her to preserve not only her youth, but also her influence. And all because in the elite circles of Alexandria and Rome, such skin was the ideal. It was a symbol of wealth and innocence. The woman's impeccable appearance was like armor. It protected her from criticism and created the so-called aura of inviolability around Cleopatra. Since during Cleopatra's life they believed in various spells and rituals, the mask was like an amulet. It not only looked after her skin and rejuvenated it. This mask was applied like a special spell. Since some of her masks and oils used the earth Milo, it was considered alive and spiritual. Honey in such cases was like a gift from the gods. It could protect Cleopatra from evil spirits and the intentions of people. And incense and myrrh drove away bad luck from the eyes. For this very reason, Cleopatra loved to apply such masks before important negotiations in order to have a positive result. Cleopatra also had a special feature. She applied certain masks on certain days. And these days depended on the lunar phases. For example, on the full moon, special masks were applied to enhance her feminine power. And on the new moon, to cleanse and renew not only the skin but also the soul. Since Cleopatra had incredible beauty, she also used these masks as sexual anchors. Every scent that was associated with her, for example, lotus saffron or vanilla, which were contained in her products, became like a scent of memory for men. Since lotus could be smelled quite often, then passing by the place where a man smelled this scent, he immediately remembered Cleopatra. Also, these scents could be absorbed into the skin through masks and oils. When Caesar or Antony smelled this scent again, they returned to those emotions of excitement and desire that they experienced next to their beautiful queen. Since Cleopatra had good knowledge of alchemy and ecology, she knew that all the ingredients that were in her masks were like a first aid kit. All because honey was against bacteria, it healed wounds and removed acne. which could appear quite often in Cleopatra due to the scorching sun. Myrrh was like an antiseptic. It helped with depression and drove away bad thoughts about women. Clay had high purification. It pulled toxins and slags from the skin, thereby making it much softer and smoother. We have already sorted out the two main aspects of maintaining Cleopatra's beauty and youth. Let's move on. The next important point of her eternal youth was makeup and skin protection, the so-called armor of beauty. It is a well-known fact that the Egyptian sun is simply merciless. For this reason, Cleopatra used special oils, such as olive almond, and they created a thin barrier film on the skin. Also, with the help of her slaves, Cleopatra mixed them with beeswax and aromatic resins. Thus she received a natural sunscreen and antibacterial balm. If Cleopatra had not used such methods, her skin would immediately become very rough, dry, and unsightly, so such oils were very important. These methods could also help her prevent premature aging, caused by dryness, burns, and even skin infections. In addition to skincare products, Cleopatra also used mineral makeup, one of which was dark coil eyeliner. It consisted of galena and malachite, and this eyeliner was not just decorative, as many might assume. Coil could protect the eyes from the sun and repel infections, as well as energetically close the gaze from people who wished her ill. But Cleopatra used not only eyeliner, she also used powder and blush, which were created from garnet ochre and white clay. Of course, these preparations not only decorated and made her even more beautiful, but they could also even out the skin. They eliminated inflammation and irritation. Thanks to this mineral makeup, Cleopatra got an even skin tone that sometimes even shone in the sun. The woman also believed that makeup could influence her feminine energy, and it really worked. She convinced herself that color, aroma, and even texture could influence her mood. They created various beautiful images and enhanced her charisma. This was precisely the so-called psychological secret. Every makeup of Cleopatra turned into meditation, and thanks to this meditation, she could rejuvenate even through her consciousness, and not only externally. Many could assume that youth and beauty depend only on various means and preparations. However, this is not so, and Cleopatra proved to us that nutrition was an important part of her life of beauty and secrets of youth. Since the girl studied the issues of her health and nutrition quite deeply, she built her diet not on abundance, but on knowledge of the natural powers of products. Cleopatra was of the opinion that she should eat not to fill her stomach, but to rejuvenate her skin, clarity of mind, and strength in her body. The girl had several basic diets, one of which was eating fruits and berries. She ate mainly figs and grapes. After all, they were substances that strengthened blood vessels. Also, thanks to dates and many other things, she could maintain the elasticity of her skin, which of course affected her appearance. Quite often in her meals, you could see olive oil and nuts, because they were a source of omega fats that could nourish the skin from the inside of the body. Slaves often brewed various herbal infusions for Cleopatra because they could not only calm the nerves, but also cleanse her skin and body. In addition to the products themselves, Cleopatra also adhered to special rituals in nutrition, one of which was slow meals. The queen sincerely believed that if she had neither a rush nor stress when eating in the morning, then her food would be accepted as a sacred act with gratitude. When she ate, she also prayed in parallel and thanked the gods for the food that she had on her table. The second important factor during her diet was the timing of her meals. In the morning, she ate something light and energetic, and in the evening, she ate more filling and warming foods. But despite her strict diets, Cleopatra also adhered to the idea that sometimes she had to cleanse her body of bad substances. Therefore, the queen arranged for herself some days when she drank simply herbal infusions or ate very light food. Thanks to such fasting days, she was able to cleanse her skin, which subsequently only became better. Cleopatra practically did not consume sugar, alcohol, and excess protein. How much it reduced inflammation and redness on her face. Due to the fact that she consumed a lot of berries, soups, and decoctions, Cleopatra could maintain the water balance in her body, which of course had a positive effect on her skin. And the natural enzymes of fruits and honey, as well as spices, were able to slow down the aging process of her skin, so she retained her youth for a long time. Also, sesame could often be seen in her diet because it was rich in zinc and vitamin E. Cleopatra quite often prepared celery and fennel because these things could remove swelling from her face and regulate the salt balance in the body. But despite the fact that Cleopatra was quite smart, she was also a very busy ruler. For this reason, she simply could not manage to cook everything for herself. Sometimes she wanted to do it herself, but this happened very rarely. For this reason, Cleopatra mainly had personal chefs and herbalists, such as culinary healers. These beautiful women who worked for Cleopatra did not just cook her food, they were even doctors and alchemists, since they had a very responsible job. These workers could select products even according to the phases of the moon and Cleopatra's body. For example, based on her menstrual cycle, sleep and mood, they chose the right products for a particular occasion and thus improved the condition of her body and skin. Also, specially trained women chose spices and oils that could regulate heat, mucus, and bile. This was such an analogue of the ancient Egyptian balance of the elements, which Cleopatra also had. These women were required to prepare dishes that cleaned the blood, gave energy without overloading the stomach, and raised the feminine power of a woman. Their main task, of course, was to monitor the condition of Cleopatra and be sure to pay attention to her appearance, the state of beauty, because Cleopatra always had to be perfect. You may be interested in how exactly they worked. And I will tell you, for example, when Cleopatra looked tired and after a difficult meeting with other ambassadors, they specially brewed a decoction of dates, roses, and even ginger for her. This helped her restore her hormonal background and, what was very important, improved the color of her skin, which had turned pale after a busy emotional day. In fact, the selection of such workers was incredibly harsh because this work was very responsible. For this reason, Cleopatra chose cooks who were also priestesses and were suitable for training in the temples of Isis, her favorite goddess. Many may not be aware of the fact that Cleopatra ate not only to saturate her body and improve the condition of her skin, but also to improve feminine energy. This energy is in the womb, skin, hair, and even voice. So there were special products for Cleopatra that she consumed to improve this energy. For example, she quite often ate nuts and seeds, sesame, almonds, pine nuts. All these substances could nourish her body system and skin. She drank flax quite often because it cleansed the intestines and was able to directly affect the frequency of the skin and the clarity of her gaze. The priestesses grew special grains for her, and with their help, Cleopatra rejuvenated the body thanks to the enzymes and living energy that were in them. For female youth, there were two main factors: estrogens and substances that cleansed the liver, so Cleopatra carefully studied these issues. In Egypt, unlike Europe, they did not even divide food into proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. They had their own classification, which Cleopatra adhered to. They had warm food that gave energy, warmed and nourished the internal organs. Cleopatra also ate cold food that cleansed, soothed, and could cool inflammation on her body or face. There was also dry food, which could help reduce swelling on the face and legs, and also promoted clarity of mind for productive negotiations. And the very last was wet food, with the help of which Cleopatra improved her mucous membranes, rejuvenated not only her skin, but also saturated her body with useful enzymes. Cleopatra also had special rituals when she ate. They were a little different from the usual. In addition to eating slowly before eating, she always washed her hands with the aroma of roses and myrrh. Before starting the main meal, she drank a sip of a special infusion. Thus, she started her digestion even better. This approach to the distribution of food in the body was able to improve its absorption and maintain youthful skin and immunity. At this point, many might think that Cleopatra ate only fruits, nuts, and vegetation. However, this was not so. Quite rarely, however, she also ate fish and seafood, but she ate them in moderation because she knew that this could have a bad effect on her body. Cleopatra had to eat such seafood because it could provide her body with protein and fatty acids, and this, in the meantime, could support the health of her skin and hair and make her even more beautiful. Besides all this, she also consumed dairy products because they were very important and provided the body with vitamin D and calcium. These substances were necessary to maintain the health of bones and skin and continue to maintain its smoothness and clarity. Thus, Cleopatra was incredibly carefully thought out and studied and also balanced for her slightly later figure and other various important factors of life. And it was precisely this detailed study of the approach to her body that helped Cleopatra maintain her youth and beauty for many years. It was thanks to the woman's balanced diet that she was able, even with an active lifestyle and the stressful position of queen, to maintain her outstanding appearance. And coming to the end of our story, I will move on to the last point of preserving Cleopatra's beauty. You might think that now I will talk again about some secrets of makeup or milk baths. However, this is not so, and all because the Queen of Egypt used not only material substances to preserve her beauty and youth, but also spiritual ones. Cleopatra was incredibly educated. She not only knew many languages of the world, she could even think at several levels of education at the same time. Many say that she could freely speak 9 languages, which included Egyptian, Greek, Aramaic, Latin, and Ethiopian as well. Cleopatra devoted a lot of time to reading and studying various philosophers, and it was thanks to this that a woman could conquer a man not only with her appearance, but also with her education. You may now wonder how this could affect the preservation of her youth, because it simply showed her as an educated person. But this is not so at all. The mental activity in which Cleopatra was engaged all her life stimulated the work of her brain, and thanks to all this, she was able to prevent age-related changes that usually occurred in old age. Also, thanks to her knowledge and learning of everything new, she improved the nutrition of the skin and cells, because when her brain worked and learned something new, it caused a rush of blood to the face and head. Of course, Cleopatra had an incredibly tense and busy schedule of her day, but this did not stop her from running and trying to do everything at once. She was a very smart and thoughtful woman, so she moved calmly and confidently. She knew her worth, and this helped her to keep even her appearance beautiful and calm, because Cleopatra always looked after her. She had a straight and elongated back. She was like a statue, and thus was even more graceful. Nothing could surprise or upset Cleopatra so much that she removed the calm and relaxed expression of her face. And since she always maintained a neutral expression on her face, Cleopatra had no wrinkles or folds, which of course showed an even greater effect of youth. Cleopatra believed that she was a woman who felt, and not only because she could cry or get angry, but because she could direct her emotions into the right thing that then brings its fruits. She also had not only physical rituals to maintain her beauty and emotional health, but also spiritual practices. Cleopatra had special morning hours of silence. She did not talk to anyone, was in the garden by the water, and simply immersed herself in meditation. Since Cleopatra had similar hours where she did not worry and did not think about anything, her face was absolutely calm, and accordingly the condition of her skin improved. Also, quite often Cleopatra prayed while sitting to maintain faith in herself and special protection. Sometimes Cleopatra, after particularly difficult days, would have a special bath under the stars. She would get completely naked and considered it a symbol of accepting life and cleansing her body. Many people might now think that Cleopatra was reserved and suppressed her emotions, but that was not the case. Of course, she knew how to cry, dance, and sing, but she did not accumulate emotions inside herself, but could release them softly and with respect at a certain time. This helped her maintain both emotional and physical health. Cleopatra did not practice showing her feelings to everyone around her, and thus it helped her not only to preserve her inner youth, but also to be a successful diplomat. An important factor in her captivating beauty was not only her appearance, but also her voice and speech. This queen had the real power of her voice. It was quiet and filled with meaning. When people heard Cleopatra's voice, they could not take their eyes off her. She captivated not only with her appearance, but also with her manner of speech. Many compared her voice to music and her words to balm, and it really was so. You may be wondering what exactly she did to have such a beautiful voice. I will tell you about several methods that Cleopatra followed to maintain a deep and clear voice. The very first, Cleopatra trained her articulation with various oils on herbal stands, and it was necessary that this happened in silence. The woman often pronounced ritual phrases with the intention as if they were mantras. Thus she was able to train her intonations and be interesting among people. Cleopatra also used a special ret-me breathing, and this helped her to maintain an even complexion and a fresh look. The harmony between her words and the behavior of her body became a whole image that could be called youth. Cleopatra had a clear understanding of the connection between her consciousness and body. So when she could think clearly and distinctly, her physical condition remained in good shape, and she was incredibly beautiful. When she could keep her feelings under control or release them at the right moments, her skin began to shine. And when Cleopatra's brain worked, she had no fear that she could soon grow old, and that her body would not be the same as before, and her skin would become worse because she lived in the present, and it was important for her to look beautiful at that moment. In order to have harmony between her soul and body, Cleopatra often asked herself various questions that helped her find balance. Every evening, she asked herself what she felt during the whole day, where she was more emotional, and what she wanted to do tomorrow, as well as what kind of person she should be. Since Cleopatra trained her awareness in this way, she had balance in life. This balance helped her maintain a relaxed face, and the peace she felt when she spoke each thought helped her maintain even breathing and a healthy skin color. Since Cleopatra verified that her face was the mirror of the soul, she cleansed and cared not only for the external appearance of her face, but also for the internal one. Cleopatra was also very closely connected with the various elements of that time. She did not just go out into the fresh air for walks and clearing her mind. She felt which element of the element she lacked and therefore restored it. According to Cleopatra, fire was important if she experienced a decline in strength. She often sat by the fire, burned various aromas, and inhaled the warmth. This helped her relax her body and face, and accordingly did not allow various wrinkles. Air helped her in case of heaviness. Walking on the roof or walking among the palm trees helped her to relax a little and let go of various experiences. She used water when she had strong internal irritation. Cleopatra preferred various relaxing baths in milk and also listening to the sound of the waves for complete immersion. And finally, she turned to the earth, walking barefoot on the sand or in the garden when she felt confused and unsure of herself. A woman with the help of such rituals and poems could cope with her emotional health. Accordingly, this affected her external factor. Thus, Cleopatra was able to preserve her youth and beauty through the years and centuries thanks to a reasonable approach. This approach combined not only physical care, but also nutrition and inner harmony, with the help of which she was able to be what she was. With the help of her wonderful milk baths, she not only washed away all the dirt for the whole day, they were able to gently renew her skin and saturate it with useful acids, which made it more velvety and supple. In addition to baths, she of course also used natural masks made of honey, oils, herbs, and clays. They helped her nourish her skin from the inside, which also had a positive effect on her appearance. We should not forget about the diet, which we have discussed in detail, because thanks to a balanced and vitamin-rich diet, rich in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and fish, it was able to provide her body with cell renewal and maintain overall skin health. But the biggest key to eternal youth was, of course, the inner harmony and balance that she could maintain even in stressful situations. Thanks to her emotional intelligence, Cleopatra retained her youth not only externally, but also internally, which was important. Cleopatra showed us a lesson that beauty was not only in external factors, but also in internal well-being. Every little detail in her life and rituals was very important, and it showed how much she cared about herself and her appearance. Only thanks to such a comprehensive approach to her life and appearance, Cleopatra was able to preserve this youth and show us how beautiful she was. These were the main facts and secrets from the life of Cleopatra that helped her rejuvenate not only her appearance, but also her soul.